with arguably one of the greatest, if not the greatest living comedian, Chris Rock. Chris got slapped in the face at the Oscars by Will Smith, which was one of the craziest things I'd ever seen.
Two of comedy's most fearless voices just joined forces to expose something Hollywood has been desperately trying to hide. Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle didn't plan this collaboration, but when both men independently started revealing the truth about Will Smith, their words aligned in a way that sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry. This isn't just about the slap anymore. This is about what happens when two comedians who've walked away from Hollywood's machine decide they've had enough of the lies. And what they're revealing about Will Smith is far more disturbing than anyone expected. So before we dive into what Jim and Dave are exposing, let me set the stage for you. These aren't just random celebrities throwing shade. Jim Carrey is a man who walked away from a $20 million payday because he refused to compromise his values.
For years now, talk show hosts, people on television, people in sitcoms, I'm sick and tired of the secrets and the lies. Secret symbol of the Illuminati.
Dave Chappelle literally fled to Africa and abandoned a $50 million Comedy Central deal because he saw how the industry corrupts people.
I wasn't walking away from the money. I was walking away from the circumstances with the newfound plateau.
When these two men speak up about Hollywood dysfunction, you better believe they know exactly what they're talking about. And trust me, what they're saying about Will Smith is absolutely explosive. Let's start with what happened that made both of them break their silence. The Oscars. Moment that changed everything. March 27, 2022, the 94th Academy Awards. Will Smith was supposed to have his crowning moment. After decades of being Hollywood's golden boy, the $9 billion box office titan was about to win Best Actor for King Richard. Everything was perfectly scripted for his triumphant night. Then Chris Rock made a joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head, comparing her to G.I. Jane. You all know what happened next. Will calmly walked onto that stage, slapped Chris Rock across the face in front of 15 million viewers worldwide, returned to his seat, and shouted profanities at the comedian.
My wife's name out your fucking mouth!
I'm going to, okay?
The audience sat in stunned silence. Some thought it was staged. Others couldn't process what they'd just witnessed. But here's what really matters, gang. Less than an hour later, Will won Best Actor and received a standing ovation from most of the room.
By what God is calling on me to do and be in this world.
That standing ovation became the catalyst for everything that followed. Hollywood had just watched one of its biggest stars commit assault on live television, and their response was applause. That's when Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle knew they had to speak up, because they'd seen this pattern before. They'd lived through Hollywood's hypocrisy, and they weren't going to stay silent while the industry protected one of its own. Jim Carrey's devastating critique. 3 days after the Oscars, Jim Carrey appeared on CBS Mornings and delivered one of the most scathing critiques to emerge from the entire fallout.
Jim Carrey weighing in on Will Smith's Oscar controversy during a new interview with Gayle King for CBS Mornings.
And gang, Jim didn't hold back even a little bit. He went straight for the jugular, not just at Will, but at the entire Hollywood system that enabled him. Jim said he was sickened by the standing ovation. Not surprised, but sickened. He called Hollywood spineless and said the industry no longer deserved to call itself the cool club. Those are fighting words from someone who's been inside the machine for over 40 years.
It really felt like, oh, this is a really clear indication that we're not the cool club anymore.
Jim knows exactly how Hollywood operates, and he was calling them out publicly for protecting Will simply because he's profitable. But Jim went even further. He said that if he had been in Chris Rock's position, he would have announced the very next morning that he was suing Will Smith for $200 million. Not $20 million, not $50 million, $200 million. And here's why that number matters. Jim was making a point about consequences. In Jim's view, Will didn't just slap Chris Rock. He assaulted the entire concept of free speech, of comedy, of the idea that words and violence are fundamentally different things. Jim emphasized that you can voice disapproval, you can heckle from your seat, you can even walk out of the room. But the moment you put your hands on someone for saying words, you've crossed a line that should result in serious legal consequences. No exceptions. Not even for Will Smith. And here's where Jim's critique gets really deep, really philosophical. Jim has spent years openly discussing his spiritual awakening and his realization that celebrity personas are illusions. In a viral 2017 interview, Jim explained how he came to understand that his own character, the wacky comedian everyone loved, didn't really exist. It was a performance he'd been giving for so long that he'd almost forgotten there was a real person underneath. When Jim looked at Will's behavior at the Oscars, he saw something specific. He saw a man who had created an avatar, a constructed identity that he'd maintained for 30 years. The family man, the protector, the beloved star, the guy who only did uplifting movies and never caused controversy. This wasn't the real Will Smith. This was a carefully curated product designed for public consumption. According to Jim's analysis, when Chris Rock made that joke about Jada, it wasn't just offensive to Will the person, it was an attack on Will the avatar, the image that required constant protection and validation, the persona that Will had spent 3 decades building, brick by brick, movie by movie, interview by interview. So Will didn't lash out to defend his wife. He lashed out to defend the illusion, the character he'd been playing for so long that he couldn't separate himself from it anymore. And when that character was threatened, he responded with violence because the stakes felt existential. Without that avatar, who was Will Smith? That analysis hit different coming from Jim Carrey. This is a man who's openly discussed how fame nearly destroyed him, how playing characters for so long made him question his own existence, how he had to walk away from Hollywood to find himself again. Jim saw Will's behavior and recognized it immediately. A man trapped inside an image, unable to be authentic, lashing out desperately when the mask slipped. Dave Chappelle enters the conversation. Now, if Jim Carrey represented the philosophical critique, Dave Chappelle came in with the street-level reality check. And gang, Dave's perspective is crucial because he's someone who literally fled the country to escape Hollywood's corrupting influence. For those who don't know the full story, Dave Chappelle was on top of the world in 2005. Chappelle's show was the biggest thing on Comedy Central. He had a $50 million contract for 2 more seasons. He was being called the funniest man in America. Then he walked away from all of it, went to South Africa, and disappeared for years. Why? Because he saw what the industry was doing to him and refused to be a part of it. When Dave finally came back and started doing stand-up again, he was different, more honest, more willing to say uncomfortable truths, less concerned with what Hollywood thought about him. So when the Will Smith Oscar incident happened, everyone waited to see what Dave would say. Dave's first public comments came during a stand-up show just weeks after the slap. He was performing in Liverpool, England, and someone in the audience asked him about it. Dave's response was characteristically blunt. He said Will had clearly been going through something deep, something that had nothing to do with Chris Rock's joke.
On the floor. First of all, do you know like that joke that Chris did? I remember when that movie came out.
He said the slap was a symptom of a much bigger problem. But Dave also said something that didn't get as much attention at the time. He said Hollywood had created Will Smith, and now Hollywood was reaping what it sowed. He compared it to Frankenstein's monster. You can't create something, nurture it, profit from it for decades, and then act surprised when it turns on you. That comment revealed Dave's understanding of how the industry works. Will Smith wasn't just a talented actor who happened to become successful. He was a manufactured product. Every movie, every interview, every public appearance was carefully managed to maintain a specific image. And that kind of constant performance, that level of inauthenticity, eventually breaks people. The Golden Globes bomb. Then came January 10th, 2023. The Golden Globes. Eddie Murphy was receiving the Cecil B. DeMille Award, his first major awards appearance in years. Eddie hates award shows, has said they feel fake and performative. So when he showed up to accept this Lifetime Achievement honor, people paid attention to every word. Eddie's acceptance speech was brief and funny, thanking various people and cracking jokes. Then, near the end, he dropped a line that made headlines around the world. "Pay your taxes, mind your business, and keep Will Smith's wife's name out your mouth."
Will Smith's wife's name out your fucking mouth!
The audience erupted in nervous laughter. Eddie smiled and continued, but the message was crystal clear. Will Smith messed up, and even someone as respected as Eddie Murphy was calling him out publicly on one of Hollywood's biggest stages. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Just days after Eddie's Golden Globe speech, Dave Chappelle was performing in San Francisco, and he brought up what Eddie had said. Dave told the audience that Eddie's joke wasn't just a punchline. It was wisdom disguised as comedy, and Dave broke it down piece by piece. Pay your taxes means handle your responsibilities like an adult. Mind your business means stop getting involved in drama that doesn't concern you. And keep Will Smith's wife's name out your mouth is the obvious lesson from the Oscar incident. But Dave added his own interpretation. He said the real message Eddie was sending was this: stop performing and start living authentically. The reason Will felt compelled to defend Jada was because his entire public identity was built on being her protector. If he'd been living an authentic life instead of performing a role, he might have handled that joke completely differently. Maybe laughed it off, maybe addressed it privately later, but definitely not with violence on live television. Dave then connected it back to his own experience. He talked about how Comedy Central wanted him to be a certain kind of comedian, to play a certain role, to perform a specific version of himself that would sell more DVDs and get higher ratings. And when he refused, when he tried to be authentic, they tried to destroy him, called him crazy, said he was on drugs, spread rumors that he'd had a mental breakdown. The parallel to Will was obvious. Both men had been performing for Hollywood, but Dave had the courage to walk away before it destroyed him. Will didn't, and now everyone was seeing the consequences. Jim and Dave's shared understanding. Now here's where the team-up really solidifies. Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle have never done a project together. They've rarely even been photographed in the same room. But in the months following the Oscar incident, both men started saying remarkably similar things about Will Smith and Hollywood's dysfunction. In a podcast interview in late 2022, Jim talked about how Hollywood creates monsters by rewarding performance over authenticity. He said the industry tells people, "Be this character we've created for you, and we'll make you rich and famous beyond your wildest dreams. But the cost is your actual self, your authentic identity, your connection to reality." Around the same time, Dave was doing interviews promoting his Netflix special, and he said almost the exact same thing. He talked about how the entertainment industry wants you to be a product, not a person. And the more successful you become, the harder it is to remember who you actually are underneath all the performance. Both men, independently, were diagnosing the same disease. Hollywood had turned Will Smith into a product, and that product had been performing for so long that it couldn't handle a moment of genuine human vulnerability or embarrassment. When Chris Rock's joke threatened the carefully constructed image,
better than anyone. And Chris is a genius comic that has been doing it for many, many decades.
The product malfunctioned, violently. The Avatar theory goes deeper. Jim's Avatar theory about Will Smith became even more relevant when Jada Pinkett Smith started promoting her memoir, Worthy, in October 2023, because that's when she revealed something that shocked everyone. She and Will had been separated since 2016. Let that sink in for a second, gang. When Will slapped Chris Rock in March 2022, he and Jada hadn't been together as a married couple in any traditional sense for 6 years. 6 years. The famous Red Table Talk episode where Jada discussed her entanglement with August Alsina? That happened during their separation, even though they performed like they were working through it together. This revelation proved Jim's Avatar theory completely correct. Will wasn't defending his wife at the Oscars. He was defending the image of being Jada's husband, the character he'd been playing for the public. The Avatar had become more real to him than reality itself. Dave Chappelle addressed this during a stand-up set in late 2023. He said the Jada revelation was the saddest part of the whole situation because it meant Will had been lying to everyone, including himself, for years. Dave compared it to method acting taken to an insane extreme. Will was so committed to playing the role of Jada's devoted husband that he assaulted someone to maintain the illusion, even though the marriage had been over for years. Hollywood's selective accountability. Both Jim and Dave have also pointed out the selective nature of Hollywood's accountability. Lesser-known actors have been canceled for much less serious offenses, while A-listers like Will get multiple chances to redeem themselves. Jim brought this up directly in his CBS interview.
You do not have the right to walk up on stage and smack somebody in the face because they said words.
He said that if an unknown actor had walked on stage and slapped someone on live television, they would have been arrested, prosecuted, and never worked in Hollywood again. But Will Smith committed assault in front of 15 million people and was starring in a major summer blockbuster just 2 years later. The difference? Box office value. Will had generated $9 billion in ticket sales over his career. That kind of money buys protection. That kind of money makes the industry willing to look the other way, to minimize, to help manage the crisis, instead of holding someone accountable. Dave has experienced Hollywood's selective morality firsthand. He walked away from $50 million because he refused to compromise his artistic integrity, and the industry punished him for it. They spread rumors about his mental health. They tried to destroy his reputation. They made him an example of what happens when you don't play the game. But Will Smith commits assault on live television, and the response is a 10-year Academy ban and some negative press. That's it. No arrest. No prosecution. No real consequences beyond some temporary embarrassment and a dip in his Q score. Both Jim and Dave are calling out this double standard because they've lived on the wrong side of it. They know how Hollywood operates. They know the industry protects profitable stars regardless of their actions. And they're not willing to stay silent about it anymore. The standing ovation that exposed everything. The standing ovation Will received when he won Best Actor remains the most damning piece of evidence for Jim and Dave's argument.
And the Oscar goes to
Will Smith!
Because in that moment, Hollywood revealed its true values. Not integrity, not accountability, not doing the right thing, just protecting one of their most profitable assets. Jim called the standing ovation sickening. He said it proved Hollywood was morally bankrupt, a spineless industry more concerned with box office receipts than basic human decency. When you give a standing ovation to someone who just committed assault on your stage, you're sending a clear message. We don't care what you do as long as you keep making us money. Dave has talked about how the standing ovation reminded him of why he left Hollywood in the first place. Because the industry doesn't operate on principles, it operates on profit, and anyone who thinks otherwise is fooling themselves. Both men are using Will's situation to expose a larger truth about how entertainment works. The standing ovation wasn't about supporting Will as a person, it was about protecting the investment the industry had made in him. When someone has generated billions of dollars, you don't hold them accountable. You help them manage the crisis. You spin the narrative. You make sure they can get back to work as quickly as possible. Chris Rock's delayed response. It's worth noting that Chris Rock himself didn't immediately address the slap in detail.
On Oscar night 2022, Will Smith slapped Chris Rock.
He waited almost a year before doing his Netflix special, Selective Outrage, where he finally unpacked what happened and how it affected him. During that special, Chris made some points that aligned perfectly with what Jim and Dave had been saying. He talked about how Will's violence wasn't really about the joke. It was about unresolved personal issues. Misdirected anger. A man who'd been performing for so long that he didn't know how to process genuine emotion anymore. Chris also refused to play the victim, which is interesting. He said he wasn't going to cry on Oprah or milk the situation for sympathy. He took the hit, both literally and figuratively, and kept moving. But he did emphasize one crucial point. Words and violence are not the same thing. Anyone who says words hurt has never been punched in the face. That distinction is at the core of Jim and Dave's critique. Comedy is about words. sometimes uncomfortable words, sometimes words that offend people. But the response to words should never be physical violence. The moment you cross that line, you've destroyed something fundamental about free expression and creative freedom. The latest scandal makes it worse. Just when it seemed like the Will Smith situation might be fading from public consciousness, a new lawsuit emerged in early 2025 that made everything exponentially worse. A violinist who toured with Will filed a lawsuit alleging sexual harassment.
A violinist is suing Will Smith, claiming retaliation after he alleges that he was fired for reporting sexual harassment.
Retaliation and wrongful termination. The details in that lawsuit are disturbing. According to the complaint, the violinist, Brian King Joseph, returned to his hotel room in Las Vegas to find unknown items including HIV medication, hospital discharge papers, and a handwritten note suggesting someone planned to return for a sexual encounter. When Joseph reported this to Will's team and hotel security, he was allegedly fired and told he was lying about what happened. Now, Will's legal team has strongly denied all allegations and called them baseless and reckless, but the timing couldn't be worse. Just as Will was trying to rebuild his image after the Oscar incident, this lawsuit brings up questions about his behavior, his management practices, and what really goes on behind the scenes. Dave Chappelle hasn't publicly commented on the lawsuit yet, but during a recent stand-up set, he made a pointed remark about how scandals tend to come in waves. He said, "When someone shows you who they really are through one public incident, it often opens the floodgates for other people to come forward with their own stories." Jim Carrey also hasn't directly addressed the lawsuit, but in a recent interview about his spiritual journey, he talked about how unresolved issues and inauthentic living create patterns of destructive behavior. He didn't name Will specifically, but the implication was clear. The career consequences. Let's talk about what's actually happened to Will's career since the slap, because the consequences reveal everything about how Hollywood operates. Immediately after the incident, Will resigned from the Academy and was banned from attending Academy events for 10 years. But the professional fallout was far more complex. His movie Emancipation, which Apple had purchased for $120 million and was positioned as his follow-up Oscar vehicle, was released quietly in December 2022 with minimal promotion. Critics were lukewarm. Audiences largely ignored it. The awards season completely shut Will out. For the first time in recent memory, a major Will Smith prestige project failed to gain any traction whatsoever. But here's where it gets interesting. Will's Q score, which measures celebrity familiarity and appeal, dropped from 39 before the slap to just 19 by early 2024. That's one of the most dramatic falls in Q score history. Studios use Q scores to determine which actors can open a movie and justify big budgets. Will went from being in the top tier to having one of the lowest scores among major actors. Netflix had just greenlit a project called Fast and Loose 1 month before the Oscar incident. They immediately put it on pause after the slap. An anonymous studio executive told Variety, "Everyone was waiting to see who would blink first. It isn't so much what he did, it was what he did after." That phrase, "what he did after," refers to Will's decision to stay at the ceremony, accept his Oscar, give an emotional speech without apologizing to Rock, and then dance at the Vanity Fair after-party. Industry insiders felt that if Will had been immediately removed from the ceremony, the situation might have been more forgivable. Instead, his behavior suggested he felt entitled to continue celebrating despite what he'd done. Bad Boys Ride or Die, the test. By early 2024, Will needed a win desperately. His career was in limbo, his reputation was shattered, and the industry was keeping him at arm's length. Enter Bad Boys Ride or Die.
Bad Boy Ride or Die, world premiere.
The fourth installment of a franchise that had been consistently successful since 1995. The timing was strategic. Bad Boys was Will's most bulletproof franchise, the one property where audiences had decades of goodwill built up. If any movie could bring Will back from exile, it was this one. Sony moved forward with a $100 million production budget and released the film on June 7, 2024. The results were complicated. Bad Boys, Ride or Die opened with $56 million domestically and $146 million globally. For context, 2020's Bad Boys for Life opened with $62 million domestically and went on to gross $426 million worldwide. So the new film opened slightly lower and performed moderately well, but nowhere near the levels of its predecessor. Industry analysts pointed out that the film succeeded largely because it was a sequel in an established franchise with a built-in audience. Martin Lawrence's presence also provided cover. Audiences could tell themselves they were supporting both stars, not just Will. But the question Hollywood is really asking isn't whether Will can still draw audiences to a franchise film. It's whether he can open an original movie as a leading man. That question remains unanswered. And according to reports from The Hollywood Reporter, Will's agents at CAA had been calling studio executives in the weeks before the release, trying to line up his next project. The strategy was clear. If Bad Boys performed well, they wanted to announce Will's next film immediately to capitalize on the momentum. That announcement never came. Despite the film's moderate success, no major studio rushed to sign Will for their next big project. The silence was telling. The industry was willing to let Sony take the financial risk with an established franchise, but nobody wanted to be the first to greenlight a Will Smith original or put him in a prestige project. What Jim and Dave really exposed. So what have Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle actually exposed through their combined critique of Will Smith and Hollywood's response? It's bigger than one incident. It's bigger than one person. What they've revealed is a system that's fundamentally broken. Hollywood creates personas and sells them to the public as if they're real people. Then when those personas can't be maintained, when the mask slips, the industry either protects the profitable stars or destroys the unprofitable ones. There's no middle ground. There's no genuine accountability. There's only profit calculation. Jim exposed the psychological toll of living as an avatar, of performing authenticity for so long that you forget what being genuine actually feels like. He showed us how Will's violent outburst wasn't really about defending his wife. It was about defending an illusion that had become more real to him than reality itself. Dave exposed Hollywood's selective morality, how the industry punishes those who refuse to play the game while protecting those who generate revenue, regardless of their behavior. He showed us that the standing ovation wasn't about supporting Will. It was about protecting an investment. Together, they've painted a devastating picture of an industry that corrupts almost everyone who stays in it long enough. An industry where authenticity is punished and performance is rewarded. Where violence is excused if you're profitable enough. Where accountability is selective and justice is negotiable. The path forward. So where does this leave Will Smith? As of early 2026, he exists in a strange limbo. He's not completely canceled. The success of Bad Boys Ride or Die proved there's still an audience for him in the right context. But he's not back to where he was either. The $9 billion box office titan who could open any movie has been replaced by a liability that studios approach cautiously, if at all. The recent lawsuit has made things even more complicated. Whether the allegations are true or not, they've reopened conversations about Will's behavior and character at exactly the wrong time. Just as some people were willing to forgive the Oscar incident as a moment of temporary insanity, these new accusations are making people reconsider whether there's a pattern of problematic behavior. Jim and Dave's critiques matter because they came from a place of authority and experience. These aren't jealous rivals or attention-seeking provocateurs. They're two of the most successful comedians in history, both of whom have walked away from Hollywood's machine at various points because they understood its corrupting influence. Their willingness to speak up forced a public reckoning with how the industry operates. The standing ovation revealed Hollywood's true values, and Jim called them out for it.
I was sickened. I was sickened by the standing ovation. I felt like Hollywood is just spineless.
Will's career consequences showed the limits of that protection, and Dave explained why it happened. The bigger truth. But here's the thing that makes Jim and Dave's team-up so significant, gang. They're not just exposing Will Smith, They're exposing all of us because we're the ones who bought into the avatar. We're the ones who believed the performance. We're the ones who made Will Smith a $9 billion box office star by consuming the product Hollywood created. We wanted the Fresh Prince. We wanted the action hero. We wanted the family man who could do no wrong. We wanted the avatar, not the person. And when the person finally emerged, flawed and violent and deeply troubled, we didn't know how to process it. Jim and Dave are holding up a mirror to our own complicity in this system. We reward performers who maintain the illusion and punish those who reveal the truth. We celebrate manufactured personalities and mock authentic humanity. We built Hollywood into what it is through our viewing habits, our ticket purchases, our streaming choices. The Will Smith Oscar incident was a wake-up call, but not just about one man's behavior. It was about an entire industry and the audience that enables it. Jim and Dave are asking us to look at that uncomfortable truth and decide what we want to do about it. Conclusion: Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle didn't plan to team up to expose Will Smith, but their independent critiques aligned so perfectly that they created something more powerful than either man could have achieved alone. Together, they've revealed the machinery behind Hollywood's image-making, the cost of performing for decades, and the selective nature of industry accountability. Will Smith's story is still being written. Whether he can truly redeem himself remains to be seen. The lawsuit allegations could derail whatever comeback momentum he had, or they could be dismissed and fade away. His next film choice will tell us a lot about where his career is headed. But regardless of what happens next, the damage Jim and Dave helped expose is permanent. Hollywood can't unring this bell. The standing ovation can't be taken back. The avatar theory can't be unheard. The selective accountability can't be denied. Two comedy legends spoke truth to power, and that truth is going to linger for years to come. So what do you think, gang? Did Jim Carrey and Dave Chappelle go too far? Or did they expose something that needed to be said? Is Will Smith capable of genuine redemption? Or is his career permanently damaged? And most importantly, what does this tell us about Hollywood and our own role in creating the system that broke him? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this breakdown opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We're diving deep into the stories behind the headlines, exposing the truth that mainstream media won't tell you. Who should we cover next? What other Hollywood scandals deserve this level of analysis? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss when we drop the next explosive video. I'll catch you in the next one. Stay woke, stay informed, and remember, question everything you see in Hollywood, because most of it is performance. Peace.